Welcome to Under the Bleachers. Chris Ransom and William Yannish here. Tonight we're going to discuss the college football 12-team playoff. And William, why don't you break down your list and your matchups? I already broke down my matchups over on Draft Utopia on Saturday on the YouTube channel. And I'll do that again. I'll give our audience a refresher, but why don't you break down your matchups first?
For sure. This is how we ended out last week, and after last week, and just the format that we decided to put together, I think this is definitely a excellent opportunity for anybody to follow along. They can start any week they want, and put together a bracket and just see how things are going to go. The thing is, last week I started out at 1 and went to 12, but 12 we're going to start out with my underdog favorite, and that's the or Ohio Iowa Hawkeyes with Cade McNamara and Luke Lachey, and some just a rather tough team there in Iowa. Like I said, that's definitely my underdog pick of them. With at number 11, I went to Mizzou. Brady Cook was a quarterback that I took a look at last year with a possible, um, evaluation incoming, but it just wasn't something that excited me, and wasn't something that jumped off the paper and said, oh yeah, hey, look at me, So I ended up with them at number 11. At number 10, I have Tennessee, and this is a rather low number for the quarterback, Nico Amaliva, and just who he is on the film that I have, looked at a little bit over the last couple of weeks, trying to decide exactly what kind of team this was, what a team, had Hendon Hooker a few years ago, and had Joe Milton, and had just so many great quarterbacks, but never really sealed away, never really put it away to anyone. And at number 9, this is a team that is kind of my one last second regrets, maybe. Well, not regrets, but it's at LSU, and of course, just because they just lost, and Garrett Nussmeier, he's a coach of or son of a coach, down there at LSU, and I feel he is actually a better quarterback than Jayden Daniels. He is a smarter quarterback than Jayden Daniels, and I feel he is a Quinn Ewers type of quarterback, but he is more accurate and more well polished to this point. Next I have is Texas and Quinn Ewers. Like I mentioned, that same kind of quarterback. Like I mentioned so many times before, he just has that very cocky, that it's borderline arrogance. I don't like arrogance, but cocky. Give me that every day in a quarterback. And I mean, just that ability to say, hey, I'm going to make this throw, and I'm going to make it right now, and just to have that kind of thing happen it's just one of those things that I love. Next is my Notre Dame, which I do have them at 13-0, and they are my Group of 5 team. Since they're not affiliated, and I just feel that they can be dangerous. They proved that, this last weekend. They came out with a win. Riley Leonard was another quarterback that wasn't overly exciting, but he still had those physical attributes. 6'4", 225, or whatever, 228 pounds he is. And I feel he could be dangerous. He just wasn't dangerous at Duke. But that's one of those things that the transfer portal really allows to happen these days. Next, I have Oregon, and this isn't the Bo Nix led, Dan Lanning, Oregon, that there was. Dylan Gabriel is a quarterback. I've said it before and I'll say it again. He is a good, maybe great college quarterback, but I don't see him translating well to the NFL at any rate for that matter. But, with Dan Lanning and the toughness that he asked for and what he asked of his players, this is college football. It's any given Saturday. Next, we go up to I've got Georgia, and I have them at 11-1. I see this as one of those teams that just has such a great surrounding cast for their players, but who are they? Carson Beck is no Jalen Milroe. Carson Beck is a good player, and he can be a good NFL quarterback, but whatever happens to that is in the future. Next, I have the Big 12 champion, Utah Utes. And this is a team that I just love. And, Cam Rising proved that. He has been my QB1 for 2 years in a row. And, he's been out for a year and a half with injury. He tore everything in his knee. I mean, everything. And this is a player that came out and, showed Caleb Williams that he just wasn't as good as everybody thought he was. And it's a player that, is 3-0 against that same Caleb Williams, but this is a team that can be so dangerous with his leadership and his heart. It is just absolutely insane. Next is my kind of Cinderella story, and that's Miami, and that's because they have Cam Ward at quarterback. They have an easy conference, the ACC, to deal with. Florida State just proved that. 2 losses open up the season, and this is going to be the team to rule that. There is a Clemson thing, and there is that, but I've seen Kay Klubnik, the quarterback Clemson, be something that made some wild throws, made some great throws, and then what was he next? Nothing. It was just so far up and down. So, I see them coming in there. Ohio State is my number 2 team, and they are the most talented team. I think that I just saw something before I got online, something about a $20 million roster that they have here. But they don't even have, they've got a 3rd-round quarterback in Will Howard. He is, although the second leading all-time SEC passer that there is. So I will, give him that. But, I believe I've always talked about coaching. I've always talked about, quarterbacks. And I like what Kalen Bauer and I like what Jalen Milroe are going to do at Alabama. That is my number 1 seed. And that is who I believe has a national championship caliber team this year. And, I almost went against that with Ryan Day and Will Howard. But then I said, I'm always talking about coaches and I'm always talking about, quarterbacks in college football. And this is just something I can't do right here. So, and that's who I see right now. Other than that, though, what would you guys like to add?
Why don't you start, Brandice? I'll give my input afterwards.
So are we going around and just giving the bracket? Or are we just responding to each other's brackets? Sorry.
That was a bracket from it was like 30 seconds late. We just started off where we left off last week. I was giving out my bracket. I just explained a couple of things. So yeah, next is your bracket, and then I'll talk about whatever else after that.
Okay. Well, so when it comes down to the bracket, it's interesting because even though a part of me is so excited about this new format, because I never really understood the previous format, because there was no previous format. It was all basically like opinion based. And I appreciate that this format makes sense, but it kind of doesn't, because you can really be in whichever conference you want. And unfortunately, there are some conferences that are a little bit more difficult than others, which means that there's going to be teams in this first round of the playoffs anyway that you're like, what are you doing here? But I love a good Cinderella story myself. So I have, and I guess I'll start at the bottom and work my way to the top. I think that, like I was talking to you, William, earlier today, just saying, I don't think that you're going to make it to the top 12 when you lose more than 2 games. That being said, a lot of the analysis that I did to look at the bracket was, what does the schedule look like? And can these teams, can they lose at least, or at most, 2 games? So, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. We're looking at number 12, which is kind of a toss-up. I'm going with Oregon. I'm not exactly sure if they'll be able to pull it off, but that's my bet right now. Next week it might change, but right now I've got Oregon. I think their schedule's not super difficult. I don't think they're going to end unscathed. I think they'll lose a couple of games, mainly because they do have some heavier matchups, in that a lot of the matchups that they have are teams that are still kind of figuring it out this season. Michigan's going to be tough for them. I do not know if they'll come out of that game on top. I'm rooting, or not rooting, but I'm predicting that Ohio State is also probably going to make it a little difficult for them. So I've got Oregon in number 12, losing those 2 conference games. Next, at number 11, I've got USC. USC has the toughest Power 4 non-conference football schedule. So they could even be 12, but the only reason that I've got them at 11 is because I think their schedule is a little bit more difficult than Oregon. And I think that'll factor in. But I do only have them losing twice. So they're in that number 11 spot. And then I've got Michigan at number 10. Now, all 3 of these teams to me in the 10, 11, and 12 spot are interchangeable, because I don't really know. I'm not super confident in any of the teams to do, anything amazing, but I do believe that based off of their schedule, they shouldn't lose more than 2 games. But I do have all 3 of those teams going 10-2, and therefore being in the bottom. Now, with Michigan, I actually only have them losing 1 game. I think that Michigan's schedule, though it's not easy, I think they should be able to handle all of these games, but I don't know if they'll be able to beat Ohio State. Now, that could change. I haven't really seen enough from Ohio State. One thing that I was doing this week is analyzing just the quarterback passing yards. And one thing that I noticed is that most of these teams that won last week, they threw for at least 150 yards. 200 is really the mark. What threw that off is Michigan. Davis Warren only threw for 118 yards. Now, they rushed a lot, so you did have that. And they were also playing Fresno State. I'm going to assume that Sharon Moore was just trying to, work out his run offense a little bit and work those kinks out, which you can do against a team that you should win against. But there are teams like Ole Miss, like Colorado, that are throwing for 400 yards plus. So your quarterback's got to be able to do it. And then going back to Dylan Gabriel, even though he didn't look great against Idaho, he did throw for 380 yards. So I think it's not just about the quarterback. We've also got to analyze the defenses of some of these teams. And I am a little bothered by the fact that Oregon gave up 14 points against Idaho, but I've got them where they are. I think that they'll still slide by, hopefully for them. Number 9 is Miami. I actually think that Miami is playing the best football they've played in quite a while. They've been slowly getting better and better year by year. Around 2022, they started getting better, and it was noticeable in some of the teams that they were beating. I've got them at 8, losing once, and I've got Alabama at 7, also losing once. Now, this bracket is a little biased because I'm a Georgia girl, so I've got Georgia going all the way. I've also got Texas at 11-1. So the assumption here is that all 3 of these teams are going to lose to Georgia. Now, I do believe that any of these teams could be Georgia, meaning if Georgia loses, and they could lose to any of these teams, less so Ole Miss, more so Texas and Alabama, they could slide down to the 6th or 7th spot. But I do think that they'll still make the playoffs indefinitely. Then I've got, like I said, 7 is Alabama, 6 is Texas. Number 5 is Notre Dame. I actually think that Notre Dame could go 12-0. I've got them right now losing once, just because it's something about that like undefeated season. You start to rest in your laurels, and their schedule is fairly easy. But I think that last game against USC, they're going to struggle. I do. Now, this is my assumption right now. I'm giving USC the benefit of the doubt and saying that they're going to play at a high level, because I do think that they did well against LSU. But that's an assumption. They might have came out of the gate really strong, and they might, fall as these weeks go by. My ACC champ that I have as the number 4 slot, just because their schedule isn't as difficult as some of the other conferences, Boston College. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but I think Boston College is going to be our Cinderella. I really do. I'm not sure why, but it's just something about that team. It's like they've got this kind of energy about them that even with Thomas Castellanos, I was watching some of his clips after the game, and they were like, so, what are you doing this week to prepare? What are you doing after the game? And he's just like, well, I've got to go to class. It's like that kind of demeanor when, this is likely could be the biggest games that he's playing in his entire career, whether or not he makes it to the league. That's what you're looking for when it comes to these college football playoffs. Somebody that's not too rattled, that's not really here to try to prove anything. He's just like going to work every day and throwing the ball. And not to mention, he's got a crazy arm. I was very, very much so impressed with him. And also, Bill O'Brien is a NFL coach. He is not going to lead them down the path of destruction. He knows what it takes to win. So I believe that they are going to be the ACC champs. I genuinely do. And then at number 3, we've got Utah. I've said this earlier in a few podcasts. I'm not a big West Coast football girl. There are a few teams that I know a lot about. Utah is just now kind of coming on my radar, but I like what I've seen so far. I've got them as the Big 12 champs. And then I think the Big 12 is a fairly simple conference to win, though, if we're being honest. I think they'll get a little bit of pushback from some of the teams, but I think they'll be able to win this fairly handedly. And then this is my question mark. Number 2, Big 10 champs. I've got Ohio State. I'm not positive on this. I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel bad about it. I switched them out like 2 or 3 times, but I ended up settling here because I just felt like I can't really say it, to be honest. I can't really say, like, I'm still trying to decide whether or not I believe in myself enough to put Ohio State here. But right now they're here. And then our number 1 seed, UGA, of course, our SEC champs. Now, again, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off. I almost kind of think they may be better off if they don't become the SEC champs. I looked at the bracket if they were the SEC champs, and the way it would work out per my predictions, they'd play Ole Miss in the quarterfinals and then Notre Dame in the semifinals. And I actually think Notre Dame could give them a run. Ole Miss could also give them a run, but it would be a rematch because they have them on their schedule this year. So it's going to be very interesting. I've never felt more like just unsure of anything in my life, but this bracket, and I think in a couple of weeks we'll be able to shake out some things.
I think what you're referring to is that it factor that they always talk about. It's that it. You don't know what that factor is, but if you lay your finger on it, you know what it is. But other than that, and I can definitely see that. And like I said, the one thing that made me pick Ohio State over Alabama was the coaching and the quarterback. I started thinking about it for a minute. I'm like, Ryan Day and Will Howard over Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBauer. I'm like, no. I was like, I just had to. I'm like, this is something that I'm always preaching about. Like I said it earlier, I was like, that was terrorizing me. Like what to put into that factor, into that thought decision. But that's one thing that's great about the 12-team playoff is just all these different teams, and it's not a bunch of old dudes in the Associated Press, like saying who they think are the best teams, so much as it is, the ones that win. What do you think, Chris?
I've got Liberty at 12 as my group of 5 team at 12-0. I've got Penn State going 11-1, losing to Ohio State at home. That's their only loss in the year, but they have a really weak strength of schedule. They get in, but I think the committee would look at that and say their strength of schedule's weak. They didn't make the Big Ten championship. Texas, I have Texas at 10. I think Texas will lose a couple of games. They do host Georgia. They do have to travel to some teams. They do play Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. That's always a barn burner. They do play Michigan on Saturday. I have Michigan at 9. I think Michigan will either lose 1 or 2 games. I don't know who. I think they're going to lose to Ohio State, and they're either going to lose to Oregon at home or Texas at home this Saturday. They're going to lose to one of those two, but I have them at number 9. I have Tennessee at 8 going. I think Tennessee is going to be the surprise team here. I think Tennessee loses to Georgia, and that's it. And I've got them at 8 playing Michigan in Neyland Stadium. Oregon's my number 7 team. I do think they make the Big Ten championship and lose to Ohio State, but I think they're a 1 or 2 loss team, and they get bumped down as a result. I had LSU at 6, and in the preseason, I had them going 12-0, but USC already ruined that. So my bracket's already been defeated in a sense because I had LSU, and they've already lost to USC, and thanks to Vegas. But, LSU, they could still theoretically make the SEC title game, lose to Georgia, and be 10-2, and maybe they're the 6th seed. I've got Notre Dame as my other 12-0 team. Utah, I have Utah winning the Big 12 at 12-1. I have them losing to Oklahoma State. I think they beat everybody else, and they win the conference. I've got the U at 12-1 as well, losing to Louisville, but winning the ACC title. And I've got Ohio State and Georgia both winning the conference with 1 loss as well, with Ohio State at 1 and Georgia at 2. And how this ended up playing out, Notre Dame ended up beating Liberty and Utah to get to my semifinals. The U won against LSU, and LSU beat Penn State. All the higher seeded teams won with home field. And I ended up picking Ohio State over Georgia. Very tough call, but Will Howard won a Big 12 championship at Kansas State. Carson Beck hasn't won that yet, but we'll see. I think it's very close. And I think Ryan Day's due for revenge after losing to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, Jay Stroud. So that's part of it. Brandice has some bias towards Georgia. I'm an Ohio State fan, so obviously I have some bias towards Ohio State, but we'll see. It's going to be fun. I think both Georgia and Ohio State are on a collision course to the title game this year.
Yeah, for sure. I see, some of these teams that just, have that dangerous ability to, be able to pop up and be able to win here and there. It's like Tennessee always, they always have a great quarterback, like I mentioned earlier, Hendon Hooker, Nico Amaliva, blah, 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 Joe Milton. It's one of those things to where, it just opens up so much more to do this 12-team format, and just opens up so much more for that March Madness feel, like when I was watching the college basketball playoffs when I was a kid and such. But I mean, like I said, I got to throw my underdogs in there, and we're going to go for a whole bunch more of that over this next season. And what is exactly going to happen? I mean, it can come out of nowhere. I remember one time I ended up, in that March Madness deal, I won a box of candy bars because what was it, like 15th ranked Santa Clara beat Georgetown or something like that. And, I just happened to have that team on there at random. And it was just, I don't know, I'm always the underdog kind of guy. And, that's like my list here. It starts out with the teams that I knew that were going to be on there, but by the time the seeding gets done, one's up here, seven's down here, five, you just got to kind of go back and forth and like go through there and have a lot of fun doing it, and these brackets are going to be a lot of fun this season, and just how it's going. What else do you think, Brandice?
I think that what's going to make the difference here, you can kind of analyze what the coaches have done, what the quarterbacks have done. You can do all of that, but, play literal Monday night quarterback. But in the end, you never know what's going to happen. And that goes in a variety of ways. You don't know what kind of injuries you're going to have. You don't know what player is going to do something stupid and end up getting suspended, which is like something that Georgia's dealing with right now.
I didn't say that word, Georgia.
You don't know what's going to happen. So it's very interesting because I do know, being a football player myself, sometimes you have these games where it's like, well, obviously you're going to win this game. And everyone goes into the game with that mindset. And unfortunately, the other team, they go into the game with the mindset of they think that they're about to kick our ass and we are not going to let them. And unfortunately, and a lot of times, those stupid losses that you did not think were going to happen, they end up just totally screwing you in the end for your playoff schedule. And that's what I'm really worried about with Georgia. I actually think that they'll play lights out football, but I mean, Alabama's not going to be an easy game for them to win, and neither is Texas. We've done fairly well against Texas in the past, so I don't think it'll be very difficult, but every year it's a new team. Every year there's new players, and every year you have a different set of circumstances to overcome. So I'm interested to see the most really who kind of shines this week. The games are fairly stupid, most of the matchups. You've really only got
Texas,
like one
Michigan, Tennessee, North Carolina State, Colorado plays Nebraska. Dylan Raiola looked good last week. Those are the three marquee matchups. Kentucky plays South Carolina on ABC at 3. That might be fun, but you're right. Most of the matchups this week suck compared to week 1, because week 1 is just about getting the season started with a bang, and week 2 it's just about easing people in before the NFL starts. And then once you've eased people in, then it's just then conference play starts in a few weeks. So yeah. Anything else before we sign off? Because I do have some other stuff I got to get to. I got to record another
for sure,
show.
Man. We've done the brackets. We're going to be next here next week to Wednesday night 8:30 to show what else has changed in that time. And I feel it's a good night. We're at a 30-minute mark, so I hope everybody has a good night.
Okay, next week.
Before we sign off, can we do our predictions for the game of the week, which I'm guessing is Texas and Michigan?
Yeah, I'll go with Texas, but I think it's going to be very close. That'll be a fun game. But yeah, week 3 has me thankful for week 2 because week 2, the only ranked game in week 3 right now is Arizona at Kansas State on Friday, September 13th. That's the only ranked game for week 3. Alabama goes to Wisconsin. That'll probably be the game the media hypes up, but it's not. I think week 3 is actually worse than week 4. I'm sorry to say, or week 2, which is this coming week. Oh yeah, Boise State plays Oregon. That's going to be fun. 10 p.m. start time.
How is that going to look after how Idaho
Ashton
played
Jeanty
Oregon
had 6
last
rushing
week?
touchdowns last week. That was incredible what he did.
And there have been some big things, Cam Rising and what's his name, Baron Morton, both threw 5 touchdowns in the first half of games. And I mean, we definitely have some things to look up to. And I think Texas is going to whoop Michigan, like I'm going to say 35-17. But other than that, that's I just love that Ewers factor.
Ewers went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama last year, and yeah, he had weapons. Michigan's got a good secondary, but I feel like going into Tuscaloosa and beating Saban on his home turf is a lot harder than beating Michigan without Harbaugh, but that's just me.
Yeah, there was something about Quinn Ewers walking into the Alabama locker room and slapping Dallas Turner's cleats off the bench and telling him to pack a lunch. And I just love that story every minute that I heard it because it just exuded that cockiness. So yeah,
all right,
I got to go with Texas again.
Who are you going with, Brandice?
I'm going with Texas. I think the SEC is going to dominate this year's college football. Like it's not going to be easy for teams to any team that's trying to win a championship is going to have to go through an SEC team. I'm just going to put it out there now. The way the brackets work, unless SEC teams just shit the bed somehow, it's going to be an SEC team in the championship, which is great because we've had some years where it was just kind of like weird. Well, I'm not going to say weird. Yeah, I am going to say weird teams, like TCU. What? How did you even get here? Like, come on. So I think that it's going to be a really good, interesting playoff bracket for sure. But I'm prepared for a Georgia, Texas. I'm prepared for a Georgia, Alabama. I hope that it's not Texas, Alabama. That sounds terrible, but I'm prepared for an SEC championship game.
All right. I mean, I can't wait for Georgia, Alabama. I think that's at the end of the month, though, on the 28th. I'm looking at the rest of the games. 21st, we get Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Utah, Oklahoma State, and USC, Michigan. So we get a ton of good matchups on September 21st, and we get NC State, Clemson. So week 4, and we get Georgia Tech, Louisville. So we get 5 ranked matchups in week 4 as an apology from the NCAA for weeks 2 and 3. And then September 28th, we get Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and we get Georgia, Alabama, and Louisville, Notre Dame. So the NCAA, we do accept your apology for these horrible matchups in weeks 2 and 3 because you're spoiling us with a lot of ranked matchups in weeks 4 and 5. That's all I'm going to say on that. I'm not going to get into those matchups right now because I got another show I got to record, premiere for, and then we might talk about some of those games next week because week 3, I'm not going to lie, outside of that Arizona, Kansas State game and Alabama, Wisconsin, it just looks like a very bland week 3. It looks worse than week 2. But yeah, that'll do it for this.
Touchdowns did McMillan catch?
McMillan against Kansas State? I don't know. Their corners are good. I'm going to say 2, but Kansas State's going to put up a fight in that matchup. McMillan did dominate, though, in against New Mexico on Saturday. But, yeah. We'll talk about McMillan and next week when we preview that game, Arizona, Kansas State, and give you an